Welcome everybody to the brand new, essentially, Iowa State Live at the Voice of College Football Network. Happy to everybody here. I'm Levi Stevenson. If anybody has followed me or anything on social media or is familiar with Wide Right and Natty Light, or maybe in our Discord server and you're here joining the video, if that is if that is the case, I appreciate you guys coming and watching and engaging with everything and leaving comments and all that stuff. And if you are not familiar with me, I am the managing editor of Wide Right Natty Light, which is Iowa State's SB Nation site. This is my 8th football season doing it. So I started at the beginning of the 2017 football season. So right as Iowa State began their ascent in football under Matt Campbell. And you also, if you're not familiar with either of those two things, but you are an Iowa fan somehow, you may have seen me do spots on Corey's show from the Hawkeye the Storm, and I've also done spots on Mark's show as well, talking about Iowa State and what's all going on. So, Mark asked me to get this Iowa State channel up and going because this is a really exciting time to be an Iowa State football fan. It's an exciting time to be a Cyclone fan, and wanted to get some more content out there for everybody to look at. So, what we're going to do today, we've got a few different things on the agenda. Obviously, the main thing you can see in this title of video is that we are going to be talking about the Big 12 championship, which is Iowa State versus Arizona State. That's happening on Saturday. And we're also, once we talk about that a little bit, we're going to talk a little bit about the 2025 recruiting class as well, because Iowa State pulled in a pretty good one and did very, very well within the state of Iowa as well. So we'll definitely talk about that since today is National Signing Day. One more housekeeping thing. I know we're live today at 3 p.m. on a Wednesday, which is not ordinarily a great time to necessarily watch a video. But going forward from here on, we are going to be doing this show on Tuesday evenings at 7 p.m. Central, so 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central. We'll be doing this exact same show every Tuesday going forward in perpetuity. So let's get started talking about this game this weekend. Obviously, Iowa State coming into this game actually both teams coming into this game on a 3-game win streak. Iowa State having beaten Cincinnati, Utah, and Kansas State on the way in here. Cincinnati at home, Utah on the road, and Kansas State at home after dropping a couple in a row to Texas Tech and Kansas. You have that tough 2-game stretch there with both of those losses, and you're a lot of Iowa State fans are sitting there wondering what can we realistically expect from this team at this point. The defense is banged up, especially the linebackers, where there is tons and tons of injuries. Caleb Bacon's been out since the beginning of the season. Will McLaughlin's been out and hasn't played at all this season. Jack Sadowski's been in and out of the lineup. Caleb Rosina, who was a true freshman that came in early, is also hurt. You've got Zach Lovett is hurt. So you're playing true freshman linebackers and things like that. And it really comes to a head during those 2 games, especially the Kansas game, where Iowa State has lots and lots of issues defending Kansas because they're having troubles with their defensive assignments. The safeties are out of position. And then Kansas is finding wide receivers all open all over the field. Is a bad time. But then you get Cincinnati coming back at home, playing against running a familiar defense with Tyson Veit now being the defensive coordinator there and largely running the defense that Iowa State has that he learned while he was here under John Haycock and Matt Campbell. And that game goes better. You finally get back on track. Cincinnati is a solid team. They're not a great team, but they're a solid team. That's a decent win, especially when to get back on track, and especially one where you get Will McLaughlin back for the first time. Which is it's a huge factor in this. Matt Campbell's talked about it extensively, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a second here. But then you go out to Utah for a road game, which at the beginning of the season, everyone on their calendar circled this game at Utah as potentially being a huge one, where maybe Iowa State is, maybe they're 10-0 at this point or whatever. Maybe they're 8-2, 10-0, whatever it is. But there was a lot of thought that the Utah game would be a potential massive contention, massive matchup here as far as determining the Big 12 standings and everything, and title game participants and all this. Now, Utah did not hold up their end of the bargain, but Iowa State is 8-2 going into this, playing against a Utah team that is struggling, and they're still playing great defense, as Utah always does. But Iowa State goes in and gets a very weird win where you see Rocco throw a pick six, and essentially between the defense and special teams, I would say essentially gift wrap 21 points for Utah, where they had to do almost nothing to earn those. And eventually, and the offense, the Iowa State offense largely did what they wanted. And you finish that game by Utah missing a kick that would have sent it into overtime. It was an odd deal because it's a game that I would say probably could have and should have won by a few touchdowns, but just could not get out of their own way as far as the turnovers and things go. So then you're 9-2 going into the last game of the season. You have the opportunity to um, win 10 games in the regular season for the first time in school history, or 10 games ever in any capacity in school history, and you get Kansas State at home. Now, Kansas State is a good team, but maybe not quite as good as people thought they were going to be. So that's what we had last week. You saw a lot of the previews you're talking about this game are talking about Kansas State's running game with DJ Giddens and Avery Johnson really potentially being a huge pressure point for Iowa State, whose run defense up to that point had been something like 110th in the country. But there are a lot of context things that we're going to talk about when I start really talking about the game this weekend, that I think are important to note about that going forward, especially with Arizona State having a very good running back of their own. But what we did see was another example of Iowa State not playing its best game. The offense especially did not play great. Rocco was 38% on completions, I believe. Rough day for Rocco. It was very, very cold out. It was weather that definitely was more conducive to running the ball. And we saw that flesh out in the game, the sequence of the game as well, where we saw passes that, from Rocco's perspective, probably could have had more touch on them, and were maybe a little bit difficult to catch, but they were still very catchable nonetheless. And we saw lots and lots of drops last weekend. And I would largely attribute that a huge chunk of that to the weather, which obviously when you're playing in a dome is not, and when you're playing in a dome in Texas in December, that is not a concern as far as the weather goes going for this game this weekend. But the Iowa State defense plays well. Will McLaughlin and Jack Sadowski are both back at full speed. The defense is as healthy as it's been in a long time now. Malik Verdon did not play, which was a concern when we didn't know about it going into the game. Especially, we're sitting there. I'm sitting there in the stands on the east side of the stadium, and I'm looking down and I see Malik Verdon in sweats, and naturally I'm panicking a little bit because Malik Verdon is one of Iowa State's best defensive players, and when he's on the field, the defense is better. And we saw also when he played 7 snaps versus Kansas, we saw Tayshaun James come in and really, really struggle, played very poorly, gave up a couple easy touchdowns for missed assignments. That was definitely a point of concern coming into this, even knowing that Kansas State's passing attack is really nothing worth writing home about. But Tayshaun James comes out of nowhere and is graded by PFF as the best Cyclone defensive player of last week. He graded out like a 79.5, I think is what it was. He was the best defensive player for Iowa State last week in relief of the injured Malik Verdon. It should not be understated how critical that is. One, just because it's good to have depth at safety and stuff like that. It's good to have depth going forward, as you don't know if Malik Verdon is going to come back or not. But being able to have that guy who had such a rough game against Kansas come back and have such a great game against Kansas State and be really a critical defender. He was the one that peanut punched the fumble out. I think it was in the second quarter out of Keegan Johnson's hands. He was phenomenal that game. But he was also part of this whole thing where you had Jack Sadowski and Will McLaughlin and Cooper Rebo all had good games against Kansas State, and it's really, really slowed down their running attack. I'll only pull up some stats here for you. If you look at the Kansas State game, I would say they've been giving up like 5.4-ish yards per carry on the ground up to that point in the season. Now, Kansas State's number there says 4.6, which is still, like, as a team, it's fine. It's perfectly, it's maybe a little bit above average. It's solid, not great, but solid. But I think the one thing we need to remember here, though, too, is that DJ Giddens did have one carry of 36 yards in the third quarter. So aside from that one busted play, you're looking at Kansas State running the ball 30 times for 112 yards. No, like 36, 108 yards. 30 carries for 108 yards, which is, just it's like 3.4, just shade under 3.4 yards a carry, which is a good number defensively. That's if you can hold your opponents to 3.4 yards a carry, that's a very good number, especially a team like Kansas State that runs the ball so well. So the defense held up against a very good running attack. And that's why I think this is going to bode well for this weekend, which we'll touch in just a little bit here too. So overall, the offense was not, the passing game just wasn't there. Lots of drops. Rocco threw some dangerous balls a couple times that were not picked by Kansas State. Probably could have been, maybe should have been. But that's the difference there between, sometimes the difference between winning and losing is that the team that's maybe moving the ball a little bit better, they don't win because you have a safety that's punching out balls and creating turnovers there, or it's the gaff on the very first play of the game when Avery Johnson misses his pitch out to DJ Giddens, and Iowa State can recover it right there and then go down and immediately score a touchdown. Or it's the hidden yardage you create on special teams via punts and kick returns and punt returns, or blocked kicks, where Kansas State had a chance to come within 4 points or 3 points or whatever it was in the fourth quarter, and you get Darian Porter who steps up and blocks a field goal. Things like that is how you win football games when you are not firing on all cylinders. And I would argue that up to this point, we really haven't seen Iowa State fully firing on all cylinders on both sides of the ball. We're looking at we're looking at this and saying, Iowa State's run defense is bad. It's not, they're having trouble doing all this, and they gave up a bunch of points. Yes, they had bad games trying to stop the run to begin the season. And they had some turnover problems against Utah and things like that. And Rocco seems to have this weird problem throwing pick sixes. But through all of that, Iowa State is still winning football games because they're doing the little things right. They're getting their hidden yards on special teams. They're starting to return punts. Jalen Noel has been fantastic returning punts the last month or so. Well, really most of the season, but especially the last month where he can get 10, 15, 20 yards if he's allowed to return a ball. And it's really been quite impressive to see that part of the game has stepped up, because if you've been watching Iowa State football for the last, really under Matt Campbell, for the most part, they didn't really bother returning punts for a long time. They just kind of sat back there. They put their hands guy back there. They sat back there. They fair caught it and said, whatever, we'll just go from there. Eventually you start figuring out, and Iowa State did, they were, sometimes they lost because of this, is that when you start losing the hidden yardage in the punting and kicking game, that field position can come back to bite later down the road, especially if you get pinned in your own area or if you get stopped. Punting at midfield is a lot different than punting at your own 20 in terms of how difficult it is for the other team to take advantage of that punt. And when you can start winning that field position battle, the rest of the game gets a lot easier. And when you can start winning the turnover battle, the rest of the game gets a lot easier. Now, when you go to Utah and you throw a pick six and you turn it over a bunch, getting your own turnovers back to even out that turnover differential helps out a lot. You're getting some of that special team stuff. The offense was doing kind of what it wanted that day. The defense played really well. They held, I want to see, I forgot, I'm pulling up my Utah stats here. They held Utah to 3.4 yards a carry. And that was even including at the end of the game when that fourth string quarterback came in and started gashing us with the read options and things like that. So if you take out those couple plays, Utah is down into the twos as far as yards per carry. And those are two good running teams. So you look at Arizona State coming up this weekend, and you see a similar team to what we saw with Kansas State. Now, their quarterback is absolutely a better thrower of the football than Avery Johnson. No question about it. Not as good a runner, and they're not going to design as many runs for Avery Johnson, but he is still an effective runner. They can get down the field. He can make people miss. And if you break contain and let him run, he will run. He'll take it and he'll tuck it down. He'll go get 10 yards. what he's done a very good job of so far. He's a redshirt freshman, 19 years old, Sam Levitt. He's done a great job so far this season of taking care of the football. He's only thrown, I think he's 23-5 is his touchdown to interception ratio. He's done a very good job taking care of the football up to this point. And that is a point that's going to be a point of emphasis for Iowa State is this, Arizona State team does not really turn the ball over all that much. So your opportunities to get the ball back might be limited, even though your defense has been pretty good at forcing turnovers. So that means you need to take care of the ball. Now, the big concern, obviously, for most Iowa State fans that are watching this and have watched Iowa State football up to this point, probably have a little red flag going up in their head. It's like, well, Rocco in the beginning of the season was very good, took care of the ball. He was great. The last, really since the bye week, or ever since after that UCF game, the bye week essentially is that kind of that cutoff point. Ever since the bye week, we have seen him be a lot riskier on throws. We've seen him throw more interceptions, throw more bad interceptions that get returned for a pick, get returned for a touchdown. That is a point of concern because Arizona State, while they are defensively, they're fine. They're not great, but they're not bad by any stretch. But they're not great. They're not going to jump off the page and really blow you away. But they're solid enough where they can bottle up offensive attacks enough so that their offense can take control of the game. Take long possessions, own the time of possession and really grind out some of these wins. Or if the defense is bad, then get some blowout wins too, in the case of Arizona. But what their defense is good at is they're good at forcing turnovers. If you throw those same balls that you saw last week against Kansas State, where Kansas State dropped them and could have housed it back. I'm thinking specifically there was one. I think it was Jaden Higgins was he was on a short hitch. And Rocco just did not see the linebacker, and he hucked it over there and almost got picked. Arizona State's probably not going to drop that, especially indoors where where nobody's cold, the ball isn't hard as a rock. Arizona State's not going to drop those. So it is paramount that Rocco gets better, especially at those short throws, at reading coverages. Because, I was listening to the Pro Football Focus guys a little bit this morning, and they made some really, really interesting points with some of their grading. Rocco, when he's throwing in the middle of the field, is exceptionally good. He's very, very good. I think he grades out like in the 90s as far as the PFF grade when he's passing in the middle third of the field. But when he's throwing short of 10 yards, he has 11 turnover worthy throws on the season on throws shorter than 9 yards. The next highest quarterback has 7, which means 4 more times this season, Rocco has almost thrown an interception on a throw shorter than 10 yards. What that tells me, in knowing that a lot of his interceptions are coming short of 10 yards and not further down the field, is that Rocco is really struggling right now to read linebackers that are dipping in and out of different zones and things like that. When he has the opportunity to sit back just a little bit and throw over the linebackers and read a safety, it seems like he's doing that much, much better. And he's been much more accurate hitting guys further down the field. And it helps when you have guys like Jaden Higgins and Jalen Knoll that can just get open downfield. But it seems like he's reading the defenses a lot better when he can throw, 10, 15, 20 yards downfield or even farther. He's reading those defenses a lot better. When he has to sit back and decipher where this linebacker that's sitting back in zone coverage, where he's going to go, it seems like sometimes he loses that linebacker in coverage a little bit and then starts forcing a ball into a tight window. And now I understand that Rocco has a little bit of a gunslinger mentality. So sometimes he's just going to try to laser that thing into a tight window just to hit there. And we actually saw that against Kansas State too, where I want to say it was Carson Brown. He hit Carson Brown in the numbers earlier, and Carson Brown dropped it. Then later on, I want to say it was on a 4th down. I have to remember exactly the play, but it was a 3rd or 4th down. He did basically the same thing and threaded the needle right through 2 linebackers and hit Carson Brown about 15 yards downfield, right on the numbers, and they completed it. It was a great throw, but that was a very tough throw, just right through this tight window. So it's hard. You want Rocco to have that gunslinger mentality because it kind of frees him up and it lets him keep looking downfield and keep looking for some deeper shots and stuff like that. And when you have 2 1,000 yard receivers in the form of Jaden Higgins and Jalen Knoll, You want him to have the freedom to start looking downfield and find those guys. But the other side of that double-edged sword is that he has a tendency to get sped up a little bit, get impatient, and he also currently does not do a good job of putting touch on his throws, on his short throws, especially. I'm thinking of the pick six. I want to say it was against Texas Tech. I want to say he threw it behind Jalen Knoll, and Jalen probably could have caught it, but it was behind him. But it came in so fast that when it hit Jalen Knoll's hands, it bounced up right into the defender. I want to say it was Texas Tech, but I could be wrong. But it bounced right into the hands of the defender. Is it kind of dumb luck that defender was there and was able to run it back for a pick six? Kinda. But some of those throws, if you're gonna throw them hard, they need to be accurate. And especially these ones that are like less than 5 yards on little mesh crossing routes, you don't need to gun them at the receiver because that makes it a lot harder to catch, especially if it's cold outside. Now, again, not going to be cold this weekend at Jerry World in Arlington, but that's a lesson that Rocco needs to learn going forward. So, knowing all that stuff and knowing that Rocco, for whatever reason, in the first 26 minutes of each half has been really inconsistent and can be a bit of a turnover machine, frankly. If you get to the other side of Rocco here, is that same quarterback when he's backs up against the wall and there's a couple minutes left in the half, and there's a couple minutes, in the couple minutes left in the fourth quarter, whatever, and Iowa State needs a drive. That same gunslinger mentality gives him the freedom that he can start taking shots and really testing that defense, and he'll tuck it down and run. And for whatever reason, that he just turns into Pat Mahomes on these last 2-minute drill, 3-minute drill drives, where he is finding receivers downfield. He's tucking and running and picking up first downs with his legs. So that's kind of you take what you get with Rocco in the first part of the game. Sometimes he can make really great throws. He can be patient. He can move the ball vertically downfield, but he, can throw picks. He can make weird decisions. But if this is a close game, which I believe it will be, if this is a close game and you have 4 minutes left, 5 minutes left, and Iowa State's got the ball with a chance to drive down and go get a score to win the game, you'd be hard pressed to find a guy that you'd rather have right now in the Big 12 than Rocco, just based on how he keeps playing in clutch situations. He's just the definition of a gamer. So, we'll see how that pans out a little bit. But with Arizona State's defense being so good at forcing turnovers and Rocco being a little bit prone to turnovers in the earlier parts of the halves, especially, you still need to be able to overcome that and mitigate that. So that way you can be tied up with 5 minutes left to go and not have to come back from 14 down in the second half or something like that. If Iowa State can avoid giving the ball to Arizona State, to me, the needle swings quickly in Iowa State's directions if Iowa State does not turn the ball over. So let's talk about Arizona State a little bit here too. So Sam Leavitt is their quarterback. He does a great job taking care of the ball. One big injury coming into this game, Jordan Tyson. He's their leading receiver, and by far Sam Leavitt's favorite target at receiver. I think he ate up like 30 or 40% of all of their targets. Their remaining receivers, I believe, have 30 catches on the air for about 300 yards. It's pretty much Jordan Travis, Cam Scadaboo, who is the Sun Devils' second leading receiver. It's those two, and then just kind of a group of people behind them. Not to say that they can't step up and have a good game, but up to this point in the season, Sam Leavitt has not targeted basically anybody outside of Jordan Travis and Cam Scadaboo. But the engine that makes this whole thing work is Cam Scadaboo. He is a very good running back. Interestingly enough, probably only like the fourth or fifth best running back on Iowa State's schedule so far, which tells you the quality of running backs Iowa State has played so far. And like I said, I think this also ties into kind of the extra context you need about Iowa State's run defense coming into this game as well. But Cam Scadaboo is the whole thing that makes he stirs the drink for Arizona State. He's he has good balance. He's a powerful runner, but he's a versatile running back. Matt Campbell earlier this week, and I think accurately so, he compared him to David Montgomery as far as his balance goes, his versatility, his power. Um, I think that's a perfectly fair comparison. He's done a great job. I think he's third. I want to say he's third in the Big 12 in rushing this season after RJ Harvey and Taj Brooks. He's had a very good season, and he really makes that Arizona State unit go. So he is going to be, I would assume he will be a focal point for Iowa State's defense this weekend, especially knowing that Jordan Travis is out. Because I believe if you're Iowa State, if you can, you would love nothing more than to force Sam Levitt to throw to receivers that he's not necessarily that comfortable throwing to into what is one of the best secondaries in college football this season. I believe they're graded out in the top 5 or top 10 as far as pass defense units in the country this season. I think if you're John Haycock, you would love nothing more than to force Sam Levitt to throw into that secondary. And at that point, if a 19-year-old quarterback, is able to make some really incredible throws to some receivers that he doesn't throw to a lot, and that's just how they win the game, then I guess touche, I guess it is what it is. But I think I would say would like that type of game from Arizona State to force them to have to play catch up and not really allow Cam Scadaboo to salt the game away by just picking up 3-4 yards a pop and getting first down and just grinding out first downs. And that's not to say that Iowa State can't play that kind of game. They have played that kind of game against a few different people. UCF was that way. Iowa was that way. Utah was kind of that way, where they're just trying to grind out first downs, slow the clock down, suck the air out of the football, because Arizona State knows that on the other side, they really don't have an answer for both Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel. They can probably cover one of them on any given play, but they can cover one of them for sure, and maybe one of the other ones. But then you've also got Gabe Burkle, and you've got a few other receivers that are available, and the running backs can catch. So if you're Arizona State, knowing that Iowa State has a very good balanced offensive attack, and especially a passing game that is capable of being pretty explosive, if I'm Arizona State, I'm not trying to let Iowa State's offense have the ball any more than I have to. So that comes down on Iowa State's defense to bottle up Cam Scadaboo a little bit, force Sam Levitt to throw, and see what you can get out of there. Maybe you can force a turnover and then really start salting the game away in favor of your cause, going on those 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-minute drives that Matt Campbell teams like to go on. Couple things here though. One interesting matchup in this is the special teams here. As I've mentioned before, Iowa State special teams have been very good this season. For the most part, a few gaffes here and there, but for the most part, Iowa State special teams have been solid to good this season. Especially the punt return and punt coverage units have both been very good. The punt return and the kick coverage units have been pretty good this season. Kick return, it seems like they've pretty much just kind of waved the white flag. We're going to fair catch everything, take up the 25 and go, which whatever. It is what it is. But we see the punt return unit. We see them getting out there and trying to block kicks, and Jalen Noel returning punts and getting 10, 15, 20 yards on returns on a fairly frequent basis. But where I think there's this kind of this X factor, if you want to call it that, is in the kicking game especially. Iowa State has found a reliable kicker in Kyle Conradi, who obviously won the Iowa game there. He's hit a number of longer field goals, 48, 50-yard field goals throughout the season. He's been a very reliable kicker. I think he's 80% on the season so far. If Iowa State needs a 45-yard field goal, they are very comfortable sending Kyle Conradi out there. Even a 50-yard field goal, no problem whatsoever sending Kyle Conradi out there. However, Arizona State has not had that at all at the kicking game this year. Earlier this year, it was so bad that Kenny Dllingham, he kind of sort of retracted it later, but Kenny Dllingham essentially called out his own kickers, saying this is not good enough, and held open tryouts for kickers on campus this season. Unfortunately for them, it has not gotten better. I believe they're sitting right at around 50% on field goals on the year, which is very bad. It's gotten to the point where Arizona State really just cannot trust their kicking game like at all. And that's reflecting in them having to go forward on fourth down more. So I want to show, I'm going to pull up a few stats here that I think are really interesting. So this is a stat comparison in terms of some metrics and some efficiency stats for Iowa State and Arizona State. What I want to look at here, though, there's a couple things that I see right here that are really interesting. So we know that Arizona State's kicking game is bad. They do not trust their kicker outside of maybe 30 yards. It's in sometimes inside of 30 yards. They're not super comfortable with it. He's missed some chip shots this year. So knowing that, and if I'm looking at here, what do I see right here? Arizona State is only converting on 52% at 52% on fourth down. That is a very bad number. If you see right there, Iowa State is 80%. I checked this. Iowa State is 16 of 20 on the season in fourth down conversions. So that is a number that where you're looking at Iowa State they're attempting it, a couple times a game, about twice a game. They'll go for it in fourth down. And right now you can just about bank on it that they're going to convert. Now, Iowa State's not going to go for it on 4th and 6 very often or 4th and 4, but if it's 4th and 2, they're probably going to go for it. If it's 4th and 1, they're definitely going to go for it, and they're almost certainly going to do a tush push, maybe even out of that Maryland dive formation that they like to use. So this is a point of concern for me if I'm an Arizona State fan, because Iowa State and Arizona State, I think in this game, both teams will be interested in holding the ball, limiting the number of possessions, so that Iowa State can limit Cam Scadaboo's impact and Arizona State can keep Rocco back in that passing game off the field. In a game where you have limited possessions, the score is going to be closer. You're looking at possibly having to extend drives and things like that. Right now, Arizona State is having some trouble finishing drives. They're having trouble converting on fourth down and keeping a drive moving. Their red zone scoring percentage is not great. I know it says 76.09%, and but that just means that they got either a touchdown or a field goal. 76% is not a good number in terms of red zone scoring percentage. And so this is a team that does not do a great job of finishing out drives. If they're not able to hit some sort of explosive play to get in the end zone, they can struggle to get points. And right now, I think that's Iowa State's focus here, because too, especially when Iowa State is in the red zone, they typically are a very good red zone defensive team. That shows an 87.5% red zone scoring rate, and I'd have to look this up what the actual numbers are, but I guess a good chunk of that is field goals, not touchdowns. Iowa State has generally done a good job this season of just holding opponents to field goals instead of touchdowns. They may be not as good at keeping them out of the red zone this year as they have been in years past, but they've done a good job this year so far of limiting touchdowns in favor of field goals. And Arizona State right now is having trouble finishing in the red zone right there. That's not a good number. That 76.09 is not a good number. So I think that's an interesting point here, because both teams are probably going to be trying to grind this out. Neither team gives up a lot of explosive plays, especially not in the running game. And I think that would be a point of concern for me if I was an Arizona State fan. You look at most of these offensively, they kind of trade back and forth as far as advantages go, but they're pretty similar. It's slight advantages here and there. I would say it runs a few more plays. Arizona State has 0.2 yards per play more than Iowa State on offense. It's pretty comparable. Their yards per pass is a little bit higher. I think Iowa State's completion percentage is a little bit lower. Arizona State here, though, if you look, Arizona State is very heavily skewed in the run. They run over 60% of the time. They pass under 40% of the time. They want to lean on Cam Scadaboo, and I expect their balance of play calling this game to skew maybe even a little bit further that way. Because like I said, I don't think that they're going to be wanting their 19-year-old quarterback throwing into one of the best secondaries in the country without his favorite target in there, and by far his favorite target. Now they do have a good tight end that scored 5 touchdowns on the year. I'll have to look his name up. But he's a solid pass catching option. But I expect this to skew more this direction. So now we come to this. The natural tendency right now in this game, as far as your analysis goes, and you're looking at this, is saying, well, Iowa State's giving up all these points on, or giving up all these yards on defense this entire season. And I don't see how they're going to stop Cam Scadaboo, how they're going to do this, because they just can't figure out how to stop the run. And Arizona State likes to lean on the run. I'm here to tell you, Iowa State fans, that is a little bit short-sighted. It's true that Iowa State's defense this year has given up more in the running game than they have in years past. No doubt about it. However, let's add some needed context to this. All these things need context. Iowa State was really, really banged up in the middle of the year. And in the terms of losing like 8 linebackers. So you are exceptionally injured through a good chunk of the season. That is difficult for any defense to overcome in terms of that. However, now that we're here, the only major starter left that is still hurt is Caleb Bacon, and he's not playing this week. Caleb Brazina is not playing this week, but prior to this, he was more of a depth piece. It sounds like Campbell said he was more of a question mark for this weekend. But Cooper Ebel, Jack Sadowski, Will McLaughlin, all healthy, playing well. Iowa State's defense has held up against 2 good running attacks these past 2 weeks. They've done a very good job of dealing with that. I think because of personnel that have gotten healthy, which the Iowa State defense is healthier now than it's basically been since the first snap of the first game this season. When you start looking at this and say Iowa State's defense is healthy as it is, and they've played really well the last few weeks against some good running attacks, this feels like one where you can't really look at what's been happening, because it's almost a different defense when you have Will McLaughlin and Jack Sadowski out there, especially fully healthy. The second part of this is, I don't know if anybody's really looked at Iowa State. Everyone's busy talking about how many yards Iowa State has given up on the ground. We haven't really talked about the ridiculous stable of running backs that Iowa State has had to play against this year. I don't even know how you would go about looking this up, but I would say that it has to have played one of the most difficult strengths of schedules in terms of the opposing running back. You have number 21 Iowa there. Caleb Johnson was one of the leading rushers in college football this year. If not for Ashton Genty, I would assume that he would probably be the Doak Walker favorite right now. He's been very good this year. Then you go down to West Virginia's got CJ Donaldson and Garrett Green. That's a very good run. That's a very, very good rushing attack. They have been all year. And then you go to UCF. Oops, let me collapse that down. And then you go to UCF. They've got RJ Harvey, who I believe is like 4th in the country in rushing. He's leading the Big 12, and he's leading the Big 12 in rushing. I believe he's 2nd or somewhere between 2nd and 4th in the country in rushing. I saw a graphic from it earlier. Taj Brooks is right behind him at like 1,600 yards. And then you've got Devin Neal right there after him. And then you got DJ Giddens right after that. Iowa State, Cam Scadaboo, I believe, will be the 5th 1,000-yard rusher that Iowa State will play against this season, and he's maybe the 4th one if you're going to rank those backs. In no particular order, I would put RJ Harvey, Taj Brooks, and Caleb Johnson all ahead of Scadaboo in terms of just running backs, I fear. But then you put Devin Neal like maybe right on the same tier as Scadaboo. They're very similar players. They're used similarly. Scadaboo's got more yards because he gets a lot more carries, but then you got DJ Giddens right behind them. Iowa State has played this. I believe this will be the 5th 1,000-yard rusher that Iowa State will have played this year. When you play that caliber of running back on a week in, week out basis, and in a conference that likes to run the football, I know that will upset a lot of people that haven't watched the Big 10 Big 12 in a few years, to find out that the Big 12 is kind of a rushing league now. It's not really a passing league anymore. When you go up against those backs with true freshman linebackers like they did against UCF and Texas Tech, where you've got Bo Goodwin and Aiden and Ryland Barnes playing full-time snaps at linebacker as true freshmen, and Ryland Barnes as a true freshman walk-on. When you play against RJ Harvey, you're going to give up some yards. You're going to give up some big plays. That's just how it works. When you go up against some of the best running backs in the country with true freshman linebackers, that's going to happen. Cam Scadaboo is a very good running back, but he is going to have to run against a as close to fully healthy as you're going to get Iowa State linebacking core. Caleb Bacon. You've got basically the starting three there, and you've got the backups right behind them that have all been playing well and gotten a lot of snaps this season. Also, if you look at the two losses, what are a couple of things, especially this Kansas loss, if you look at where Devin Neal had a good game? What was Iowa State missing in that one? You're missing Malik Verdon, who played only 7 snaps, and Dominique Orange and J.R. Singleton were both out for this game. Dominique Orange didn't even travel, and I believe Singleton only played a handful of snaps. So you're missing your two best pass rushers as well, on top of having a bunch of true freshman linebackers. However, J.R. Singleton is healthy. Dominique Orange is healthy. Jack Sadowski is healthy. Will McLaughlin is healthy. Most of that group is as healthy as they've been all season. And we saw in the last 2 games, the rush defense look a lot more like the rush defense that Iowa State fans and college football fans are typically accustomed to seeing from a John Haycock defense. So I really don't think, I think if you're looking at Iowa State's rushing totals, just the yards per game they've given up through the entire season, I think you're missing a lot of key context points that show that that is a very misleading statistic as to the defense that Arizona State will be playing on Saturday. Not only do you have all those people back, they've played well the last couple of weeks. It's not super cold outside, so you can get a little. And you're playing on turf, so you'll have a little bit better traction and things like that. I really don't think it's a good idea to just say, "Well, Iowa State can't stop the ball, it can't stop the run. Cam Skadaboo is a great running back. Arizona State's got this." That is a foolish endeavor, in my opinion. That's not to say that Cam Skadaboo can't go off, but it's also not to say that Cam Skadaboo going off means that Arizona State's going to win. If you look at all of these games, let's look at UCF, for example. We're going to pull up RJ Harvey's stats here. What did he have? He had 203 yards on 25 carries, and Ja'Carry Brown, the quarterback, had 155 of his own. UCF ran for 362 yards. What was the final score of that game? I don't remember, but Iowa State won. No, it's so Iowa State won that game. And you look at the Iowa game, Caleb Johnson ran for like 160 yards, I want to say. Let's see here. Caleb Johnson had a big game too. He had 197. He ran for almost 2 bills as well. What happened? Iowa lost because they couldn't throw the football. UCF lost because they couldn't throw the football. And you get down here, you start looking at West Virginia. West Virginia had a nice day. Iowa State did a good job, generally speaking, of bottling up the West Virginia running attack. They only ran for 163 yards there. But Iowa State ran away with that game. That game was never close. Not in the second half, anyways. Taj Brooks didn't do much of the game, but he had a big last drive. Texas Tech obviously won that game. Iowa State should have won that game. It's one of those where Iowa State has survived good running backs. Kansas State this past weekend. Now they're not going off. They're just being pretty much held down. Avery Johnson had a fine enough day for 4.9 yards carry, 13 attempts, 86 yards. DJ Giddens, he had 14 attempts, 75 yards, but 36 of that came on one play. If you take that away, he's running for exactly 3 yards a carry on those 13 remaining carries. That's nothing. That is not a good number if you're on the offense. So Iowa State's defense, the larger point to this really is that Iowa State's defense is not nearly as bad at stopping the run as people think they are. And they are definitely, and Arizona State is going up against the best version that this running defense has been all season. And then on top of that, you still have one of the best secondaries in college football. If Iowa State can make Sam Leavitt throw into that, I think the needle skews towards Iowa State. And all of this boils down to why I believe that Rocco Becht may single-handedly determine the fate of this football game. Because, hear me out, Iowa State really does not actually turn the ball over very much outside of Rocco throwing interceptions. They really don't fumble the ball much. They had a couple there for a little bit, but for the most part, don't really fumble the ball much. The turnovers really almost entirely come from Rocco. In my opinion, looking at this game with Iowa State being the more balanced attack, as far as what each team can do well on offense, Iowa State can do both well on offense. They ran the ball well against Kansas State and a couple other teams. They've thrown the ball really well against other teams. Arizona State's going to be very run heavy in this game, and that's okay. You've got a couple very good running backs there, especially Cam Skadaboo. And their defense is solid. They're not great, but they're solid. This is time where I believe if Rocco limits his interceptions and limits the turnovers and Iowa State isn't giving the ball to Arizona State, then the needle starts pushing towards Iowa State more as the game goes on and as long as they remain not turning the ball over. If you throw one pick and it doesn't go for a pick six, that's something Iowa State can survive. If you start handing Arizona State points in the form of defensive touchdowns or special teams touchdowns, that's where it gets much harder to win this game because Arizona State has the ability to sit and to salt away games with that running game. So, like I said, I believe that Rocco Beck may single-handedly determine the fate of this game. If he remains calm, does not throw more than one interception, and the interception is not a pick six, one is okay as long as it's not a pick six. But as long as he can keep his turnovers down and make good decisions and make good throws and return to his normal 60-ish% completion percentage, I believe Iowa State has a fairly notable advantage here, especially in the offensive side of the ball, where they can just do more. They can do more things in their offense, where if Arizona State starts locking down on the running game, Iowa State can go over the top and throw the ball. I was actually just today listening to the PHNX crew down there. They covered the Sun Devils down in Phoenix. And one of the things they brought out, one of the things they pointed out was that Arizona State essentially runs the same defense as Kansas State. And I think that's notable. You can look at Iowa State's performance last week as saying, well, they're not great. But like I said, the weather, I think, affected the passing game quite a lot. Rocco was also just not that sharp. But when you say if it is truly pretty much the same defense as Kansas State, it's a week ahead of film, so he can see similar looks on film, so you can learn from that. You're not going to deal with the weather issue. Kansas State historically has not done a great job of holding down Iowa State's offense. So like I said, if Iowa State can limit turnovers, especially Rocco, if Rocco can be accurate and decisive and not get happy feet and make good decisions, this is I think Arizona State's defense can hold up for a while, but I just don't think that they can contend with the versatility for an entire game. I don't think if it gets to the point where Iowa State can really do what it wants in the passing game and get the ball to Jaden Higgins and Jalen Knoll and Gabe Burkle or maybe Ben Bramer if he's healthy, I think this game becomes pretty significantly harder for Arizona State to win because I don't think their offense is going to be able to keep up in a shootout just trying to run the ball all the time. I don't think they're going to be able to keep up in a shootout. And Iowa State's passing game is much more capable of driving down a field quickly and getting a quick touchdown or getting first downs to move the chains, things like that. I just think it's going to be a difficult sled for Arizona State. I mean, all that said, though, I mean, I do believe Arizona State's a good football team. I think this will be a close game, but I really do think that the fate of this game almost entirely lies in Iowa State's hands in the ability to not turn the ball over. If you don't turn the ball over, you are fine. You're the more disciplined team. If you look down here at penalties, Arizona State is also fairly well disciplined, but they do a good job. But Iowa State is a very disciplined team, generally speaking. I know as Iowa State fans, it gets frustrating looking, you see procedure penalties, you can see false starts and there's a snap infraction last week or late subs or whatever it is. As a whole, though, Iowa State is a pretty disciplined football team and does not commit a lot of penalties. Arizona State isn't a hugely penalized team, but they are a little bit sloppier than Iowa State as it comes to penalties. I just think this is an interesting matchup from the offensive side of the ball because they do have such a good running back. Their running game is very, very good. But we've seen Iowa State have the ability to run the ball if they, especially if they can get the passing game opened up a little bit. If the great part about Iowa State's balance is that both the passing game and the running game are capable of being good enough to propel the offense to a win on its own. Not necessarily like consistently with the running game, especially, but the balance, what it means though, is that if one is doing really well, you can either sit on it because they're not going to adjust to it, or if they do adjust to it, you have the counterpunch to continue to move the ball well. If they, if you're throwing the ball well and they draw back from the line of scrimmage, the running game is good enough, especially with Carson Hansen running vertically, that this is an opportunity for Iowa State to really gash them if you can get something going in either of them, really. was looking at a couple of the comments here. Hunter says, I agree. ISU needs to not have self-inflicted penalties if we want to win. If we do avoid that, we do have a great chance. Couldn't agree more. Oh, let's second one here. ASU losing their leading receiver is definitely going to make them more one-dimensional and make it harder for them to come back if they're behind. Couldn't agree more. Let me pull up Arizona State's passing stats here. Let's see here. Let me look up their targets and stats here, their receiving stats by player. So if you look at their receiving stats, we've got really three notable guys here. Obviously, Jordan Tyson way out ahead at 75 receptions for 101 yards. 75 receptions for 101 yards. Clearly, by far and away, his favorite target, Sam Levitt's favorite target. Cam Scatterbo is their second leading receiver with 35 catches, 468 yards there. After him, it drops off quite a bit. You got Mateo there, who gets a few targets, but the rest of these guys just do not get the ball much. You're talking once or twice a game, really once a game for most of these guys. It's not a receiving core that is deep with targets and completions this year. I will be curious to see how Arizona State handles that. That is currently not something that they've shown that they've needed to do or that they can do necessarily, is to move the ball through the air without throwing to Jordan Tyson. Somebody's going to have to step up on Saturday because you can't just not pass the ball. But that feels like that feels like tough sledding, I think, for Arizona State if they can't get Cam Scatterbo to really start taking off. But I still do think, though, that this comes down to Iowa State and turnovers. If Iowa State wins the turnover battle, I really think this one swings in Iowa State's favor pretty quickly. I won't give my prediction today because I'm going to give my prediction latest. You know what? I'll give my prediction. This is a different network. I'll give my predictions twice this week for people that that are watching this and like to watch and like to consume wide right content as well. This one feels like a game where Iowa State, where it's going to be close. Arizona State may get out to a lead because they tend to like to start pretty fast. But obviously, as we know, Iowa State is definitely a second half football team. I think it's a team that does as much as I can't believe I'm saying this because of how much we've kind of joked about it, them not doing this over the years, but Iowa State has been winning in the margins the last few weeks, last month or so, outside of the turnovers, whether it's with special teams or it's big plays at the end of the game, things like that. Iowa State's been doing what it needs to do to win. And Iowa State feels like a team that if things aren't going perfectly, Iowa State is definitely the team that is more equipped to deal with adversity in terms of personnel and what they can do on the offensive side of the ball, what they can slow down on the defensive side of the ball. It just feels like if Iowa State doesn't beat itself here, Iowa State probably should win this game. But I believe it's going to be close because I think it's going to be a low possession game that both sides will be interested in really sucking the air out of the ball. So my final score prediction here, I think, is going to be, I'm going to say it's going to be 31. I'm going to say it's 31-27 good guys. 31-27 Iowa State. I think they take care of the ball enough. Cam Scatterbo probably has a big day, 160 yards and a couple touchdowns, but I think that the passing game, while they may not turn the ball over, I think the passing game is going to struggle to really move the ball a lot, besides maybe converting some first downs and things like that. And I think when it comes crunch time, I think Iowa State will be able to lock down their passing game a little bit. So 31-27 good guys this weekend for Iowa State in the Big 12 championship game. So one thing I want to touch on before we get done here today is signing day. So Iowa State signed most of their 24-25 class today, as did everybody else's. Today is the early signing day across college football. And I will say that this class is a very interesting one, specifically because if we look at the state of Iowa, which Iowa had a pretty good year this year as far as just the depth of recruiting there. Iowa State did really, really well. They grabbed Will Hawthorne there out of Gilbert, Ethan Stecker out of Spirit Lake. He's a 4-star quarterback or 4-star linebacker. Ethan Stecker is a 3-star safety, borderline 4-star safety there out of Spirit Lake. Alex Mansky is your quarterback for this class. Depending on the service you look at, he is as high as I've seen him as high. And I've seen him as a 4-star recruit. I looked at this like an hour ago. I think he was a 4-star recruit and he was like 26 in this position. I kind of think they might have adjusted the rankings like literally within the last hour and dropped him down because he was right here at 26 before. So that's interesting. Either way, he's a talented quarterback. I was watching some film of him earlier. He does a nice job. He has good footwork. He throws a nice ball. He's not super mobile. He's not like a running QB, but he's mobile enough to extend plays and things like that, which is I think is in a Matt Campbell offense. I think that's really what you're looking for is you're just enough to extend plays and if you scramble if you need to, but you're not, Matt Campbell's not trying to, have an Avery Johnson type of thing where you're really going to try to run the football with him. You got like just a nice class out of Iowa here. 4-star linebacker, borderline 4-star safety, borderline 4-star QB, high 3-star offensive lineman here. You got another 3-star edge rusher there. Zay Robinson out of Valley is an exciting receiver. I think you got some really nice things there. What's really notable here, though, I want to pull up these state rankings for the state of Iowa. Look at all of that cardinal and gold right there. If you look at the top 10 prospects, Iowa's got 1, 4, and 7. And Iowa State has 2, 3, 5, 6, 8, and 9. And it's not because number 9 is an 83, and that's just we're the only one that offered him. We're talking Zay Robinson being the lowest ranked Iowa recruit at an 87, composite score on here. And he's got a pretty good offer list. I would say Colorado, Iowa, Kansas State, Missouri. I mean, he's got a nice offer list from some teams from some very good programs there. Iowa excluded there. You've got a nice list there, and you got some other guys up here that have really, really nice offer lists. Will Hawthorne, I'm not sure what his offer list looks like because I know he committed fairly early, or like I think teams backed off fairly early on him. But I mean, he's still got a lot of the big ones, kind of the big solid programs. You got Kansas State, Kansas there, Nebraska's there. I mean, Iowa State did a nice job hauling in some really, really good recruits. I'm gonna look at Ethan Stecker's list and just Iowa State in South Dakota, but he's ranked up there at 89. I'm willing to trust the scouting evaluation there. Alex Mansky has a nice list too. Kansas State, Minnesota, Nebraska, Texas A&M is on there. Pitt, Wisconsin, Missouri, Virginia, I guess Missouri didn't offer, but they did a nice job filling a lot of good spots in the class just within the state of Iowa. They did a great job. Because, we all remember, Iowa State fans always remember back to the days where, Iowa owned in-state recruiting. If it was a half decent prospect in the state of Iowa had him. Let's go back to 2016, the year. This would be the class. This would be the class, right before Matt Campbell's first season. If you look at the state, let's look at Iowa State let's look at the state of Iowa in 2016. I'm sure we're gonna have some fun names in here, but a couple guys: Arkansas, Nebraska, Iowa, Minnesota, Iowa, Bowling Green, Northern Illinois, Wyoming, and then finally Carson Lensing. Carson Lensing is your only recruit out of the state of Iowa that Iowa State gets in that 2016 class. The only one. Now, there's not a lot of names in here that are like really that turned out. I mean, TJ Hawkinson, I guess. Yeah, that's a good name. But most of these didn't like turn out to be like incredible players outside of TJ Hawkinson. But you still had, you look at the state of Iowa like this, you got 92, 90, 87, and then some solid 3-stars and stuff like that. You're not even competitive. Let's even look at the 2017 after Matt Campbell's first season. There we go. Iowa. It's Michigan, Iowa, Michigan State, Iowa State, Iowa, Miami, Iowa State, Iowa. You're not getting, and you look at them, there's Colin Newell there, and there's Jake Hummel there. But otherwise, Alex Kleinow didn't do much. John Nagel didn't do much here. Devin Moore didn't do much. He transferred to South Dakota, I think, after his freshman year. Tristan Wirfs and Oliver Martin right there. I mean, both of those had good college careers. Iowa State got dominated in the state of Iowa for a long time. But flash forward to 2025, look at the state of Iowa. Iowa State, Iowa State, Iowa, Iowa State, Iowa State, Iowa, Iowa State, Iowa State in the top 9. It's excellent. Great job. Kind of amazing how the depth of 3-star talent though in the state this year. I mean, you got 3 stars from Iowa going all the way down into the 20s. You know, UNI is getting a 3-star quarterback from Iowa. Northern Illinois is getting a 3-star interior lineman. You got some guys going to North Dakota State. You know, the depth of talent in Iowa this year apparently is very good. And you've got 6 of the top 9. Nice. So excellent job in the state of Iowa, but let's look at we can look at the whole class too. Actually, let's go this way. Right there. Okay. So took care of a lot of things within the state of Iowa that you wanted to get taken care of. Really, really like that. Kamari Moore was a later commit out of Lee Summit, which is Kansas City, out of the Kansas City area. Nice play, really nice player here. I think this is a guy that you're looking at. I think he can be a really nice pass rusher later. You know, like Iowa State's defensive tackles typically aren't big stat guys. They don't rack up a lot of sacks or a lot of tackles or anything like that. But this feels like a guy that can turn into a Dominique Orange kind of guy. He's not nearly as big as Dominique Orange is weight wise, but I think he can turn into a nice pass rusher there. Josh Patterson is going to be a nice safety prospect. I wouldn't be shocked if he gets a chance to play a little bit next season, depending on what the safety situation looks like. Because you're losing Bo Freeler and Malik Verdon. Jeremiah Cooper, you're assuming Jeremiah Cooper is back, but outside of Jeremiah Cooper, if Malik Verdon doesn't come back, you need to get more depth back there in the safety spot. You'll have Tayshaun James and Jamison Patton step up. But you need to go there. All Gas No Breakfast wants to know any news on the last commit not signing yet, BJ Carter. I'm not familiar with that situation. Sometimes guys just sometimes they just wait until the February signing day to sign their letter of intent for a number of different reasons. Maybe they committed late and they're just not ready to sign yet. Maybe it's an academic thing. I'm not saying it is, but I'm not familiar enough with the BJ Carter situation that I can really elaborate on that too much. But I would not be alarmed by that or anything like that. I think that's just a situation where he's just not ready to sign yet. Shout out here, LaMarcus Hicks II coming in. I don't know if he's a PW or if he's a scholarship player or not, but cool getting a legacy there. Like that a lot. We had a Polynesian offensive lineman commit yesterday. I think that was kind of out of nowhere. That was an interesting one from Utah there. Got some really nice names in here. I think this is a class that I think you can have some early contributors. Will Hawthorne, I think will have definitely. The trick with Will Hawthorne is I think he's good enough to maybe be able to justify playing maybe as early as next year. And we've seen that Matt Campbell is not afraid to run out a true freshman linebacker if they're good enough to do it. However, I think I've stated this on podcasts before, but I think the silver lining out of all these linebacker injuries is that you've got so many guys taking snaps this year that next year, when basically the entire unit's back and they're healthy, you have a huge number of guys that have played good Big 12 football. I mean, you're talking about Caleb Bacon, Cooper Ebel, Caleb Brzezina, Jack Sadowski, Will McLaughlin, Bo Goodwin, Ryland Barnes. I mean, you're talking about having 8 linebackers right there at minimum that have played full-time snaps at linebacker in the Big 12 and have played well in either the whole time or in spurts have played very well. Like in the case of like Bo Goodwin and Ryland Barnes have been pretty good, have had their freshman moments, but have been generally pretty good. You've got an enormous amount of snaps coming back at linebacker next year, just by virtue of having to play damn near everybody in the program. And I'm even forgetting like John Klosterman's will be back. He played a bunch before he got hurt. So honestly, Will Hawthorne's good enough to potentially play next year, but he's going to run into the problem where he just might have too much stuff in front of him right now to play, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Ethan Stecker is a guy I think he can potentially at 6'4", 200. That's really nice size. We'll see. With safety, it's always about how smart are they? Can they Can they be relied on in deep pass coverage and things like that? And what kind of a run stopper can they be on the perimeter as well? So that'll be a factor for Ethan Stecker going forward. But I think this is another guy that has a chance to play early. Alex Mansky, I mean, I think he's coming off, I believe he's coming off of Tommy John surgery coming into the season. So he's not going to play. He will not play one snap next year. No chance. He's not playing. Do not expect one snap from him next year. If he's healthy enough to take one in a bowl game or something like that, or not, well, if it's in the playoff, he's not going to take a snap. If he's healthy enough to take one in garbage time in like late season, if you're blowing somebody out, like Oklahoma State or somebody, sorry to straight to my Oklahoma State friends, but great. If he's healthy enough to do that, great. But in that situation, you're probably still going to get Connor Moberly in there or something like that. So I would not expect Alex Mansky to be taking snaps next year, and we'll see even the year after that because Rocco still has 2 more years left. So it might be a while before we see Alex Mansky, but I think he's talented enough that he can be the next in line. He's talented enough to pass Connor Moberly in the time that's allotted. I don't know that he will. Connor Moberly is a good quarterback. We've seen him make some really nice plays even this season, but we'll see. Offensive line's a little bit tough. I mean, we saw Brendan Black play last year, but I think it was more out of necessity than anything. Unless he is a real stud that comes in, he's going to have to put on a little bit of weight, probably another 30 pounds or so. But unless he comes in as a true stud, I would guess Will Tompkins probably doesn't get a lot of snaps. He'll probably get his redshirt games, I would assume, but I wouldn't expect much. Jack Limbaugh is a guy that I think he's got a real chance that if he can get here, I don't know if he's coming in the spring or not, but if he's coming in the spring, I think this is a guy that has a chance to get some playing time. Because he can come in, but if he comes in the spring, he comes in January and really gets in the weight room, he can add 30 or 40 pounds before the season and get up to 250. If you can be at 6'4", 250 as a freshman, as an edge rusher, you've got the body to play right away. We'll see what his ability looks like, but he's got the potential, I think. He's got the body there that I think he can play early as well. So the great part, though, is that Iowa State has developed some really nice depth in past seasons where you don't need these guys to play right away. Now, if you look at the 2024 class, Dominic Overby has gotten snaps this season. He looks like he's going to be a solid player going forward. I think we're going to see more of him. Cooper Alexander, I think we haven't seen a lot of him because I think he's been partially hurt and the tight ends have been kind of hurt in general. But I think he's a guy that people think will be kind of next up in the tight end room. We've seen Dylan Lee get some snaps. He looks like he's going to be a nice little running back. They've done a good job in preserving his red shirt. Yeah. So all gas, no breakfast here to ask the $1 million question. What about JJ Cole? Listen, if I were JJ Cole, I would be evaluating my situation here a little bit because, and this comes down to what JJ Cole wants. It's become clear to me. I think it's clear that Connor Moberly has passed him on the depth chart and that JJ is third. Rocco's got 2 years left. Then Moberly's got another year or two after that. And then you got Alex Mansky coming in, who is a very talented quarterback. If JJ Cole wants to play starter snaps sometime soon, he's going to have to transfer. I mean, just period. He's going to have to transfer because there are at least 2 quarterbacks in front of him right now. And, past next season, there might be a third. So if JJ Cole wants to get starter snaps, he's going to have to transfer. I don't know if that's to an FCS program, if he goes to South Dakota or something like that, or what the plan is there. I'm not sure. There are certain guys that they just wait their turn. Gary Vaughn did that at Iowa State. He was there for 6 years. He didn't start until his 6th year. And he was solid. But he waited his turn. I don't know if JJ wants to wait his turn. If he wants to, great. I'm sure Matt Campbell is more than happy to have him in the program. For a guy that seems to be as talented as or that has a ceiling that JJ maybe does, where we think he can be a good player, maybe he decides that I need to go to a different situation so that way I can get more snaps. I don't know. Can we turn him into a tight end? I would say QBs get turned to linebackers. Unfortunately, JJ Cole is probably not swift of foot enough to get turned into a positional player or a not quarterback. But As far as JJ Cole goes, barring injuries or a massive offseason surge from him this coming offseason, I don't know. I don't know what the future at Iowa State looks like for JJ Cole. And it's a bummer because he was so highly rated coming out of high school, and we kind of thought he would be good. I honestly think that him not getting the start last year was a matter of Rocco being in the program a year earlier. And Rocco played well last year, and he's played generally pretty well this year. Yeah, especially to start the season, he was very good. He kind of just had the bad luck of the guy in the class in front of him turned out to be pretty good and got the starting job early in his career. And then now the guy behind JJ in the class behind JJ also has turned out to be, we think he's pretty good. And then the guy 2 years behind JJ, we think he's also pretty good. Now for Iowa State, this is a good problem to have. You keep bringing in good quarterbacks that you have to keep pushing good. That you have to push a good quarterback out the door so you can bring a better quarterback in. It's a good problem to have for Iowa State. I don't know what his mindset is. His dad, he grew up a Cyclone fan. His dad is an Iowa State legacy. Maybe he just says, I just want to be an Iowa State. I just want to be a Cyclone, and I'm going to help out in any way I can. And maybe he stays. I don't know. But would I blame him for leaving to see what he can do at an FCS school or a G5 school? No, not at all. I get it. Like, if he wants to transfer after the season to go pursue playing time, I don't think anybody could blame him, because right now there's too much stuff in front of him right now. And Rocco still has 2 years left after this if he wants to. And then Connor Mobley's after that. And Alex Mansky is right behind him. So, I'm not sure what JJ's solution is, but if I were a betting man, my guess is that we don't see JJ Cole start a game at Iowa State ever, unless there's some totally wacky series of injuries that we have to go start a third string quarterback. But I just don't see the path forward for JJ Cole as far as starting games here. As much of a bummer as that is to say. But you look at here more at this 2024 class. Caleb Brzezina played great snaps. We think he's going to be great. He was really good this season. Brett Eskilson has got some nice snaps here the last few weeks and has made some good plays. Whoopsies. Bo Goodwin has gotten a bunch of snaps at linebacker. AJ Burton, I know, is a guy that they think is going to be pretty good. Mason Miller is another guy I don't know. He's played a little bit this year. He hasn't played a ton, but he's played a little bit. I think he's going to be really, really good. I think he's got a chance to be great. You just got a lot of guys in here. Eli Green, and that transfer, Dylan Barrett as transfer has played well. They've got a lot of depth built up through the last few years, that some of it is starting to percolate up through the depth chart and showing up there. So some of these guys in the 2025 class will probably make some noise right away. The great part is you really don't need them to. It'd be interesting to see. I think this is a situation where Iowa State has finally started to build up enough depth where you don't really have to worry too much about which freshman can make can step into a gap and hopefully keep things together. So that's Iowa State's 25 recruiting class. As far as the transfer portal goes, I don't know what Iowa State's plans are. I would assume at minimum they probably go get a receiver or two. I would guess at least one receiver. I would bet you probably go look for an offensive lineman, just because you have Jalen Travis leaving. I think you maybe look for a safety and maybe a pass rusher. Actually, probably a corner too. You're probably looking in the secondary. You're probably looking at a receiver. But I don't think Iowa State has any major, there's not a lot of major holes that they're going to need to find a solution for in the transfer portal. I think safety and or corner, I think, would probably be one to look at if it's not for a starter, but for a depth piece. I think that would be a good spot to look. And I think they're going to go after at least one receiver there just to see what they can find. I think if next season your starting three receivers are Dominic Overby, Brett Eskilson, and some combination of Overby, Eskilson, Alton, the transfer from Army, Eli Green, and maybe Daniel Jackson if he comes back. Some combination of those five. If those are your if three of those are your five starting or your three starting receivers, I think you're fine with that. But if you can go in the portal and find a high-end receiver talent like we did with Jaden Higgins, I think I would say we'd be more than happy to go grab somebody like that. Is Bloom going to get us another kicker? I don't know. I'm trying to think. Is Kyle Conradi a senior? He's not a senior, is he? I thought he's a freshman. I could be entirely wrong though. Yeah, he's a freshman. Yeah, Kyle Conradi's here for a while. I mean, they can go get another kicker if we need it, but I don't think they're going to necessarily prioritize getting us another kicker. Fortunately, I don't think we need to spend NIL money on a kicker this time around. Maybe a punter. I don't know. I don't think I saw any punter on that list, so I don't know what their plan is there. If they're fine, if they're just going to say Jace Gilbert's the guy, I'm not sure, but I think that will be interesting. So I think unless we've got any other questions from chat, I think we're probably going to wrap her up in about an hour and 15. Like I said, going forward, expect this show to be Tuesday nights at 7:00. I hope next week we are back talking about the Big 12 champion Iowa State and deciphering whatever playoff matchup we get sent to. But either way, we're going to be there. We're going to have fun. I hope everybody that tuned in, I hope everybody that enjoyed this. I think this was a fun little look into this game. Do a little bit more deep dive into the stats than we typically do, like on the nightcap at Wide Right or something like that. Try to get a little bit more deep dive into the stats, but going forward, we'll do some more of this stuff. We'll look at, we'll look more in, maybe we'll do some film reviews some weeks. When we get to the off season, we'll cover some recruiting stuff. We'll cover some more preview stuff, maybe talk to some other teams, things like that. We'll do some more fun stuff in the off season too. So appreciate everybody for stopping in and checking the stream out. And I hope you guys join next week. Remember, it's going to be Tuesday evenings at 7 Central PM, 8 Eastern. I think it's going to be a good time. And thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you guys on Tuesday. Go Cyclones.